Dudes, what is happening? It's Trent here with Trent's Game Room. I had a chance to catch up on some video games over the holiday break, and lo and behold, we finally got our hands on Final Fantasy 15. Now, a lot of you have already heard all that you probably need to know about this, but what I want to talk about mostly is, well, for one, of course, my experience with it, being a longtime Final Fantasy fan, and two, from the perspective of a game developer and a person who I've worked in character design and video game development for a long time. So it's not that I'm going to have some brilliant insight that you've never heard before, but certainly from a character designer standpoint, I have a lot to say about this. And as a world building kind of a concept artist, I have a lot to say about this. So let's just jump right into it. There were a lot of great things about Final Fantasy 15 that I really had missed. The thing that they nailed was the open world exploration. The entire first half of this game is super cool. I mean, you're cruising around, you've got a lot of choice in terms of where you want to go, and there are a lot of areas that you run into where you get a sense that I'm not ready for this yet, and I better come back after I've trained up or become more powerful or gotten more powerful gear. And they did a really excellent job at that. There was a weird kind of a thing where you can't always fast travel to locations. And what that means is you're literally cruising around with nothing to do except look at your characters while they're driving for entire 5 to 7 minute stretches of time. This is great if you like to check your email a lot or tweet or whatever and distract yourself, but it can be very distracting in terms of progressing and staying in the game. I don't necessarily have a problem with that in the beginning. It sort of forces you to really breathe in the atmosphere, breathe in the environment. You really get a sense of the distance between locations and the fact that this town is directly located, west, for instance, of this other town, but there's a huge mountain range in the middle and that sort of a thing. And you would otherwise miss that correlation or connection between locations if you just fast traveled, for instance. So I definitely prefer it over a list type of a menu. And I hope that this is something that the spatial distance between locations is something that they keep in the Final Fantasy series moving forward. If every Final Fantasy was just the first half of what this game is, I would be pretty stoked about that. But there are some drawbacks to that, and I think they could have done something a little bit more clever with the traveling period of time where the characters are traveling. It may just be because you don't have direct control over the vehicle, and maybe if this were an airship or something of that nature, that you might have a little bit more. I don't know, it might just feel a little bit more rewarding since it would be something that you can actually shape your destiny, where you're going. If you see something in the distance and you want to go there, you can just literally move there. But later on, there were some more mobility options, such as the chocobos and a few that I won't spoil, that allow you to get around to even more distant locations and traverse more of the terrain. And that's really kind of cool. I think that they could have played that up a little bit more. However, once you get to probably about, I would say, maybe 30 hours in, 35 hours in, depending on how much exploration you do, it kind of puts you back on rails, and then you go through this really depressing story. Let me lay it down like this. There's a definite culture difference going on here. I've always loved the kind of stories that I've found in Japanese RPGs, specifically the original Final Fantasies. I always thought it was really cool how you'd be traveling around with a group of people, and maybe you go to one of their hometowns and somebody's got some unfinished business. You got to take care of their unfinished business. And after you've taken care of their unfinished business, you get a greater sense of who they are, how they fit into their world, and then why they're important to your group and your world. That you're the story you're experiencing. And this game does do that a little bit. The drama between characters, I don't get. I don't understand. There's a moment in which the story, and again, spoiler free, the main character is sort of a reluctant king. He's supposed to take the throne, and they're trying to play it up like, hey, you're not You know, you're not taking this very seriously. And so one of the characters is always kind of saying, hey, you know what, there's more to this job. You got to just do what you got to do and leave us behind because you're supposed to fulfill this destiny of becoming the king. And then later, when one of the characters starts to sort of fall behind because he's injured, that same character starts saying, hey, you know, there's more people around here than just yourself. And it's a confusing message of, am I supposed to be feeling bad about going off and doing my responsibility, or am I supposed to feel bad about leaving my friends behind? And so it sort of tugs at both ends of the same kind of emotional drama that I'm supposed to feel. And I just, quite frankly, don't. Because it really wasn't much of a dilemma. You sort of basically just cooked up a big drama and then made me have to deal with it. And I don't really appreciate that. So keep your opinions to yourself, Gladio. Should have left you behind. You know, and that's another thing is that there's a scene, there's a moment where the main character, he needs to say something. He needs to just tell his bros how much he cares about them, but he can't. Why is it so hard to tell people how I feel? I don't get it. I don't understand that, dude. Just spit it out. Tell them you care. It's fine. It's totally macho to say you care. It's fine. Especially if you're gonna be the damn king. You can say what you want. You don't even have to mean it, dude. There's not gonna be a sequel. Next thing, it's really unclear as to who the good guys and who the bad guys are. There are characters in this game that they're helping you out through the entire game, only to find out later that they really didn't like you and they were going to kill you anyway. And it's not even that they used you to get something. They just helped you as if they were totally your friend and you're totally cool with them, even though you know fully well these guys are not on your side, but they're helping you. And then just for some reason towards the end, they go, you know what? I'm not really your friend. And you're like, no shit. Why the hell did my character believe that you ever were? I have no idea. I knew that. Everybody knew that. The king knew that. Everybody who watched the movie Kingsglaive knew that. Even like the gas station attendant knew that you weren't a good guy. The main characters are not very bright in this game. All that said, overall, some of the most epic battle scenes. I wasn't sure about the combat, but it really kind of grew on me. And some of the titans and some of the characters, enemies that you fight are really legendary. I mean, it really pushes. This is a game that pushes combat in the Final Fantasy series to a level that I don't think I've ever seen. They had sort of touched on this sort of a thing with those PSP games where they were like a battle arena kind of a game and your character's zipping all over the place, just sliding around. And don't get me wrong, I sort of miss the more grounded type of a stuff. There were a lot of details that I really appreciated, such as when you sort of phase in weapons. If you're standing too close to another character and you're phasing in your weapons, it kind of comes around, it swivels around your character, and if somebody's standing too close, they actually kind of get hit from it, and they go, "Hey, I'm standing here," and I thought that was a really neat little touch. The other things like it's really rewarding when Ignis finds a new item or a new ingredient, and he stops, snaps his fingers, and goes, "I've come up with a new recipe." And I thought that was pretty cool. It does kind of remind me though of the voice acting. I thought was pretty damn good, but one thing that bugs me is that these guys are they're royalty, right? And they're all kind of, you know, a little bit kind of hoity-toity. And so they're out on an adventure of some sort, and it just so happens that the riffraff have gone and gotten themselves into a spot of trouble, you see, while everybody else sounds like a country bumpkin. Well, you know, we got ourselves a little bit of a rap problem out back, and then the main characters are like, oh, good heavens, we'd better jump right on it. What kind of ruling class would we be otherwise? And it just doesn't really, I kind of feel like it's sort of this elitist kind of we're the only ones who can save the world kind of a thing. And it's not just, I'm not, it's not a dig on Brits. I think the accent's awesome. But when you're snooty about it, come on, come off your cloud. That's a Final Fantasy riff. Classic. But that's enough about my impressions of the game as a gamer and just playing the game. And I would definitely recommend it. If you are into RPGs, I personally love games about exploration, finding cool new caves and all kinds of hidden areas and things of that nature. But I want to talk a little bit about the artistic design of the game. For one, I'll say that I'm not big on the giant electric shavers floating in and dropping off a bunch of enemies for you to fight. I love the concept of enemy dropships. Don't get me wrong, kind of gives the world a sense of like, hey, this place is lived in, and these guys are hunting for you across the desert and whatnot, and through the forests, and that's pretty cool. Sometimes you're driving around, and the car will come to a sliding halt as an army of these dudes jump out and start fighting you. And I thought that was really cool. What I don't care for is the conceptual design of these ships. They literally look like hair clippers with the grating and everything like that in the front. It's a really poor mechanical design. The second thing I'll say is that a lot of the architecture, it's just like Midwest US gas stations and warehouses. So that's not particularly thrilling. I'm not very excited about that. This could have been a world where I don't know, everything could have been built around a different energy source. If they've got all this Magitech, why not use that to actually fuel your vehicles? The characters are driving around in what looks like a souped up, I don't know, is this a Rolls Royce? I don't even know what kind of car it is. I'm not big on cars, but it looks like something that you would drive through the streets of Shibuya in Tokyo to show off how much money you have or how successful you are. Not what you drive around on a demon hunting adventure with your bros. Furthermore, some creative examples of what I'm speaking of are that the vehicles themselves could have been powered by the Magitech, for instance, or some other energy source. And instead of gas stations, maybe they've got to hook up some crazy crystal hose kind of a thing that siphons energy out of things, and you have to collect them in the environment and bring them to these gas stations or refueling stations and do something more inventive with it than just, your everyday average gas station down the road with pinball machines and whatnot. And speaking further about the main characters driving around in their car for this epic demon hunting fantasy adventure, I do feel like the story that their costumes are telling is not the same story as the game, as what the gameplay is telling me. The gameplay is telling me that these guys are traveling across this expansive world, helping out all these people who have got troubles with the Empire and with crazy beasts coming out at night, and the nights are getting longer, and there's all kinds of demons everywhere, and these guys have to fight them. And yet the story that the characters' costumes are telling me is that they've got a fashion show to get to before 6 p.m. before Mugatu assassinates the Prime Minister of Malaysia. It's just not the same story. Everything, their hairstyles are a little bit too perfect. They're wearing white pants. I know that these are optional outfits, but I feel like it's the standard. That's what it starts as. Even the all black leather doesn't really communicate to me that these guys are prepared to be thrown around in the mud, climb through caves. They're a little bit too perfectly clean all the time, and they look like they're ready to go out for a night on the town more than they're ready to go out and fight off hordes of demons and save the world. A good example of this in contrast would be if you look at The Witcher, for instance. If you want to put on Skellige armor, the warriors from the islands of Skellige or whatever, then you can put on their armor and look exactly like them, and it is a functional outfit. And if it's thin leather, you're going to have less defense than if it's really thick, heavy plated metal, and that's going to really affect the actual stats. I feel like with Final Fantasy 15, they could have had a hobo who's wearing gems and crazy amounts of jewelry and begging for change. And I'm supposed to believe that the story he's telling me is the same story as what he looks like. And it's just simply not true in any capacity. And I don't want to pick on Tetsuya Nomura, except that he puts his name in the front of the attract screen where it says Final Fantasy 15 characters created by Tetsuya Nomura, so he's the only person that I could really blame for this. And the thing that I'm going to suggest is that I don't know how much of a sense as developers, I don't know how much they really had a team effort going when it came to character design. Now, what I'm used to when I worked at the companies that I worked for, you generally want to have a lot of iteration. No matter how big time the character designer is, he's always subject to his team's input, kind of going, well, hey, wait a minute, I made some changes to this. What do you guys think of that? You have these meetings, you go back and forth, especially for very important characters. No one person is sort of just the be all end all character designer. That just doesn't really happen in a environment that developers are generally all contributing in. And I'm being very critical because this is my job. I mean, I'm a character designer, I'm an environment concept designer. And if I kind of took that role of having all of that responsibility on just myself, and I said, look, I'm not taking feedback, I'm not taking your suggestions for my character design, then I think that really hurts. That would hurt the products that I work on. Not to mention that that doesn't really fly in American game development companies. Everything that I've done is very much a team effort. We do a lot of back and forth between things with character designs. And if something doesn't make sense to a large portion of the group, then we rework it and we try to find a solution that does make more sense, a solution that is more exciting for the whole team to work on. But I recognize that that's exceptional, that's rare, but it's also why the games that I've worked on have been so successful, I think. Monster design. Final Fantasy 15 does a pretty damn good job of redesigning the classic Titans and summons. These guys are badass. I wish that I could use them whenever I wanted. It's very limited as to when you can use them, and maybe that's something that they'll fix in some DLC or something like that. I don't know, to give you more freedom. Many of the enemies and creatures in the game are sort of throwbacks to the old school Final Fantasies, which I really liked a lot. But I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of that fantastical, whimsical Final Fantasy. I recognize that their whole theme when they were making this was, what if Final Fantasy was real, set in a real world? Well, they did that and they managed to capture a lot of the what I consider to be boring about the real world too, which is in just characters walking around the street wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I don't really want that so much in my Final Fantasy. My favorite Final Fantasies are the classics, and when I talk about classics, I'm speaking about 12, where you had like a weird creature type of a thing lumbering through the street carrying barrels over his shoulder, and you had mages and wizards that actually looked like mages and wizards, not these guys wearing like scarves around their necks and t-shirts on a hot sunny day and sunglasses. But in conclusion, I was very pleased with Final Fantasy 15 as an effort from Squaresoft to try to get back to their roots. I really appreciated what they did to move it forward, but still, for the first time, I understand where they were intending to go. The whole idea of losing the world map, I miss those. I miss the classic world map type of RPGs, but I realize that they've got to move forward by placing you in that space. And it might take you 3 or 4 hours to explore a beach, whereas with a world map, it takes you 3 or 4 minutes, and so I do kind of get where they're going with things, but I hope that they apply a lot of this to a world that is a little bit more fantastical, a little bit more whimsical. And I'm talking about like a Final Fantasy IX. I'm talking about a Final Fantasy VII. Really curious to see what they do with the remake, and also even more so Final Fantasy VI. These were in my heart and in my mind, the greatest RPG experiences of all time, and still are to this day. I can go back and play them anytime, even though they're turn-based, still amazing. I feel like level 5 has really kind of picked up where Squaresoft left off, and maybe it's just the changing of the guard, new people in charge, but I really hope that they can apply this kind of open world to a more fantastical, whimsical kind of designed world. And with that said, dudes, I'm going to leave it in your hands. Let me know what you thought of Final Fantasy 15. If there are games that you feel like you'd love to hear me talk about, and from my perspective as a game developer, please drop those in the comments section below. And if you'd like to see some of my character designs and things that I've done for some of the games that I've worked on, check out some of my other videos on my channel. And until next time, I will catch y'all on Yonda Bond. All right, ciao.